Welcome. In this video, I will cover the crane lift configuration screen. The lift configuration screen is where you will set the weights and values used to determine the success or failure of a lift. This configuration can be refined down to each individual crane lift. This video is to be viewed after viewing the crane overview video part 1 and 2. There is a hierarchy to keep in mind when you're dealing with the lift configuration for the crane. The lift configuration that is set when you add in the crane for the first time is the default configuration. These values can also be modified for the crane using the Edit crane. These values in this lift configuration will be what you see by default when you open up the lift configuration for the crane placement. If the crane placement has any of the checks removed from the auto boxes and those values modified, any of the check assign or assign lift tools will follow the configuration values of the crane placement. This is, of course, only if the values are not modified for the individual lifts in the check assign tool lift configuration screens. Confused yet? Let me demonstrate. I've already added the crane and set the values for the lift configuration. I will edit the crane's lift configuration and we can see the lift values used for the crane. Note, for example, the capacity limit is 100% of the rated load and the weight for the slings and rigging is 150 pounds. Now, when I edit the crane placement, we see that all the auto boxes are checked with a default of 100% capacity and 150 pounds for the slings and rigging. The same applies to the other crane placement P2. When I run the check assign member lift, for example, we see in the lift configuration that the values for the lift matches the original crane's defaults and the crane placement values. I will now modify for the first placement P1 the capacity from 100% to 95% and then set the slings and rigging weight to 200 pounds. When I edit the crane's lift capacity, it is still at 100% with 150 pounds for the slings and the rigging is not changed. When I run the check assign member lift selecting the P1 crane placement, then edit the lift configuration, we see the default capacity is 95% and the slings and rigging weight is 200 pounds. If these values were left, the lift would be calculated using these values. But I want to demonstrate how you can refine the lift down to each individual lift. I will modify the capacity to 90% of the rated load, set the slings and rigging weight to be 300 pounds, and force the calculation to be determined for the main line. When we view the lift configuration calculations, we see that the main line was used for the calculation. The value of the rated load is 90% capacity and the slings and rigging weight is 300 pounds, which was used for the deductions. If we like the results, which I do, I will assign this to the crane placement's lift list. When I look at the lift manager for the P1 crane placement using the Manage Lifts tool, we can view the lift. Notice the values I used still remain. Or we can even modify the data for the lift configuration from the lift manager using the Edit command. I will modify the slings and rigging weight to 350 pounds and then view the new lift calculations. I will finish by reporting the data using a PDF format. In short, the lift configuration data is transferred from the crane to the crane placement. Each crane placement can modify the lift configuration. The modified lift configuration values are then transferred to the Check Assign and Assign Lift tools, right down to the Manage Lifts screen. Time to look at what each value represents in the lift configuration screen. Capacity limit is used to determine what percentage of the rated load chart is to be used for the lift. This value can also be set in Job and Fabricator options under Crane Setup. As mentioned in the overview, SDS2 will calculate 75% of the rated load to determine if the lift is critical as per OSHA subpart R. If you were to set this value to 75% capacity, any lift exceeding 75% of the rated load chart's capacity would be failed as opposed to indicated as a critical lift. Miscellaneous additional weight allows you to add in any weight for the lift calculation. For example, a crane with a very long boom which, per the load chart specification, requires that the weight of the hoist line be added into the deductions. Well, this weight can be added into the miscellaneous additional weight. Counterweight will allow you to select the counterweight used per lift. Generally, this will go no further than the placement lift configuration. Hoist line that is used for the lift can be left to the system to determine, or you can specify which line you want to use. For the hoist line options, you select the line and the associated fields for that hoist line will be shown. The weight for the hook and ball and the slings and rigging are quite clear. The minimum distance from the sheave to hook is used in determining the lift height. The sheave would be the tip or head sheave. The line below sheave when lifting from another line is used to calculate the weight of the hoist line when lifting from another line. The vertical distance from hook to center of mass is also used for determining the lift height. As stated in the overview video, the point used for the reach and lift height is the center of mass for the lift. This excludes the user-defined lift created with the Check Assign Load Lift tool, where the user-selected point is used. This concludes the lift configuration video.